Hello there, super sober heroes. Welcome to Gay A. It's your host, Steve, and I'm here with 1,336 days sober. And today I am here with the amazing and wonderful Holland. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
And for those who haven't had the pleasure to get to know you IRL yet, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, my name is Holland. I'm an alcoholic. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. The beautiful part of the Twin Cities is what
Mhm.
I say. It's like where all the old hipsters go to retire. I have a sober date. It's February 2nd, 2022, and I'm super excited to be here.
Excellent. And speaking of being super excited, what would you say has you most psyched about being sober today?
Oh gosh. Well, today during therapy, the thing that I was really excited about was it sounds really crazy, but that I can like feel all my feelings and then I have steps to kind of help work through my feelings. Because I think that's the cool thing about being sober and having a little bit of time under my belt is like being sober doesn't mean I have to avoid my feelings. I drink to avoid my feelings. Being sober means I get to feel all the big feelings that I want to feel and then rely on the fact that like I have tools to like make sure I don't do the crazy next steps. Because I do a lot of work just to live next door to crazy.
No, I hear you on that. Like it's wild. Like I thought, like after like with the urge and desire to drink stopped, I was like, okay, cool. I don't have to work the steps as actively every single day, all the time now. And I'm like, just because like not working them doesn't make like the drinking want to happen. Like it doesn't mean that I'm normal and stable and not very unwell if I'm not actively working steps. Like I get unhinged very quickly without meetings and step work and sponsors and being connected.
Yeah, no, I was talking to my therapist about it and I wanted to ice pick my neighbor's tires just because I don't like the way they park. And she was like, what are the consequences in that? And I was like, who cares what the consequences are? And she was like, well, what are the consequences for your boyfriend who lives with you? And I went, oh, well, if we're gonna put like that spin on it, I get it. So I guess like being sober means I think of others now. Blech.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Yeah. Well, what is, would you say is also your favorite part of being a member of the queer community today?
Right now, I think the my favorite part about being part of the queer community is like, especially with where I work, I do hair for a living. Knowing that with everything going on in the world right now, that I'm a place where someone can go for like 30 minutes for a haircut and feel safe.
Hmm.
You know, that for the next 30 minutes, you can vibe, be yourself with me, and whatever's going on around us, like that is your space to feel safe. And the fact that I can provide that and like stand in solidarity with a lot of that makes me really grateful to be a part of that. No one has to feel they have to go through any of this alone and to be a place for someone to land when like everything seems unsure is nice. It's nice because we're not just doing recovery alone. We don't have to do any aspects of our life alone.
Yeah, definitely. All of life is scarier when we are not connected, but yeah, the more we're connected, the better. So, and I'm actually going to be releasing this like with relatively soon from when we're talking. So this is going to be very timely still when it comes out on Thursday because it's been a rough couple days and weeks. So, with all of that, why don't you share a little bit more about how you got here to where you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in Hawaii and Alaska. So I am not a typical what we call like continental United States American. And I lived in Hawaii till I was 7, and then I moved to Alaska when I was in the second grade, and it was an experience for sure. And my problem in life has never been that I never felt like I fit in. My problem was I never gave a shit about fitting in. So
Mhm.
like I remember when I moved from Hawaii to Alaska, there were all these kids that were like, he's weird. He's wearing shorts. And it's like, you're pasty white. Why would I care about anything you
Mhm.
say? And that was like kind of the switch where I was like, oh God, like all these people like want someone and like I'm cool just like bebopping through life by myself. And I started drinking when I was like in fourth grade. And then that quickly led to one time I went to this guy's house when I was like a fifth grader to buy weed. And he was like, I don't have that, but I got this stuff. So I was introduced to alcohol in its many forms pretty quickly. And from the time I was like 10 to 17, I don't think I really ever drew a sober breath. But that wasn't weird where I was from. I like want to emphasize that like when I talk to other people from Alaska who've gotten sober, they're like, yeah, like I get it because everyone was doing it. So while drinking and doing drugs was really normalized for me, I think the way I did it was insane. So you hear some like people who experience drug use such as like amphetamines being like, I just really love doing it and having sex with a bunch of people. I really like doing it and stealing boats from the Coast Guard. That was what I thought was a good time. And then when I was 17, I used to love getting in trouble with the law. That was my vibe. If it was like suggested not to do it, I was all for it. When I was 17, I was arrested. And this time it was a bad one. Like we were arrested for a lot of not great stuff. And my lawyer at the time was like, hey, like the last couple of arrests you've had have been drug and alcohol related. How do you feel about going to treatment? And I was like, no, I'm like down for going to prison. Because when I was younger, I watched this show called Oz. And if anyone who's seen Oz knows what I'm talking about. So I thought that prison was going to be like, I go there, I find a hot boyfriend, like maybe I get to do some fun drugs, like I get in like this really great shape. If there was drugs and hot guys there, I didn't know where to find them. All my prison experience was I can tell you a lot about the 2010 NBA playoffs, and I know how to play spades. And I read a bunch of James Patterson books. So after a couple months of doing that, I decided to like take them up on this treatment offer and I went down to Seattle, Washington, went to treatment, was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous through that. I was sober for about 5 years. When I was 22 was when I went back out. I don't really believe in this whole like higher power thing because if God was real, this bad thing in sobriety wouldn't have happened to me. So then like I can sum up the next 6 years of my sober life as like I was in recovery, but like I couldn't put time together because I was trying to do Alcoholics Anonymous without spirituality. And what that looked like was I was just like a shell of a person inside the rooms of recovery. So like I knew I couldn't live without recovery, but I hated going to it. And then finally, like in February of 2022, I got COVID, but I was living in Iowa, so COVID wasn't real. And I went to a Walgreens to buy Theraflu. And the Walgreens employee was like, hey, you know, you could probably buy a bottle of brunettes for cheaper, which is true because I was buying like 6 bottles of Theraflu. And the next thing I knew, I was drunk again. And what was different about this one was it was the first time that like the elusive effects for alcohol for me when I drank again after my first stint of sobriety was it made time stop. And like I finally understood that like feeling of being able to catch my breath and like my mind stopped and time just stood still for like a couple of days. And this time when I drank, I didn't experience that. I was just drunk and miserable, which is a combination I had never experienced before. And that was not the vibe by any stretch of the imagination. So I decided to go out to Minnesota, went to a treatment center up here, and what my mindset was getting sober this time was having a new experience. Like I had been in AA at that point, like 12 years, and I knew that if I was going to do it, I was going to have a new experience with Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was going to have to have a new experience with God, and I was going to have to like quit this attitude of knowing everything.
Mhm.
Because if I knew everything, then why was I one of those bozos who was in treatment again? That was what started my journey of getting sober this time, and it's been great.
I've loved that. I followed you on social media for way longer before we connected. So I see how you're living fabulously and fiercely sober out loud, and I love that. What has it been like that's made it different this time around in terms of what you do on a day-to-day practice?
So the biggest thing that I do different is I really lean into this idea of spirituality, but I don't do it in a way where I know what God is supposed to be. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but like I leave that whole what is supposed to happen and like what God is supposed to be and what everything's supposed to look like really ambiguous. And what I feel like has happened because of that is I'm able to kind of go with the flow that like recovery asks us to do, but I never could get into that because I was always so regimented and planned. And now I just like lean into that. Like, as long as I'm like useful to other people today, then like whatever is supposed to happen is supposed to happen. And so far, I haven't been displeased with anything that's happened. So I haven't really questioned it.
Yeah, I love that. And you are always, it sounds like, doing some bit of service as well. What other types of tips or tricks do you give people to help keep them sober, if they're struggling?
So I would say like getting involved like with the service structure of recovery, whatever program you're working, there's a whole service structure that exists to maintain that these rooms still exist. And that was like the biggest thing for me was getting involved to like make sure that the door was always open for someone who needed it. And what that looked like was like in the beginning, I gave a lot of rides to people who would fly in to go to the treatment center I went to. I'd pick them up from the airport. And then that turned into me getting involved with like our district and then leading up into like me getting involved with area. I do a lot with like the young person scene here. And I just say yes to making sure that like the rooms can stay alive in whatever way that needs to be. And I don't ever go into the mindset of like, just because like I have fancy positions now in my service life, if I'm at a meeting and I'm asked to like clean up chairs, I never say no because I don't want to ever be too big to clean up chairs because like 9 times out of 10, that's when I meet my future sponsees because we like are talking while we're cleaning up chairs. But I think that just like being available to be of use.
Yeah, I definitely love that. And I love, yeah, you're never too big for any service. I'm like, yeah, doing chairs, that's the easy stuff. I'll do that over
For real.
I'll do that over planning programmings and doing all this any day of the week. So give me chairs sometimes. Yeah. And with the great thing about being part of a community and connecting with more people is that we build and strengthen these deeper relationships. How have your friendships changed in your recovery?
So I would say, like in the beginning, like I think a lot about this time when I lived in Iowa. I hated my time living in Iowa. The way they did AA there wasn't wrong, it was just different. And it was all about like status, and like here's the thing. I was cool in fucking high school. So like I don't need to be cool in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like if I wanted to be popular again, like I would just tell stories from like when I was popular. But that was not the vibe there. And what my friendships consisted of was like the status thing, like who's going to the most meetings, who is the biggest service position, who's meeting with their sponsor the most. And that just felt really disingenuous. So what my friendships look like today is like I just surround myself with people that I can authentically be myself around all the time and like they have a space to be authentically themselves because like 9 times out of 10 those people who are like 9, 10, 11 years sober, those are like my closest friends in recovery and they're still crazy. We never get like unwound. And that's like we just have these friendships where we can be authentic about what we're going through as opposed to putting up that front of like, well, I got the wife and I got the kids and everything's perfect. Like I don't surround myself with those people. I
Yeah.
don't surround myself with the people that wake up every morning and levitate to the bathroom to take a piss. I surround myself with the people who are like, I woke up today and it felt like someone flipped a switch and I'm insane. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I get that feeling because we give each other the space to be that.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I had boring friends, like if I had friends that were not crazy, it'd be so boring. I don't know whether I'd be friends with them. So no, I love my batshit crazy friends.
Yeah, I have a friend from Wisconsin.
Mhm.
Check out her book. One time, she is my queen of heartbreak, who like dates all the bad guys in AA who turn out to be men in AA. And one time, she writes poetry to deal with it. So we were like, turn this into a poetry book. So she wrote a book called Every Feeling is Big about all the men in AA who have broken her heart, and it's divine. It's so good.
That sounds awesome. I'll make sure I link over to that in the show notes for people to want
Yeah,
to check out.
Amazon. Every
Amazon.
feeling is big. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of dating, what has dating for you been like in recovery and sobriety?
Oh gosh. So when I like, thank God when I first got sober, like when I was young, because I was 17 when I got sober the first time, and I moved to from Alaska to Seattle, and I knew that I was like attractive, but then being like new and then in recovery, being young and also attractive, it was like when Thanos put in that last Infinity Stone and he was like, I'm infinite. That was me. I got it. I was like, yo, men, putty. And thankfully, I had a sponsor at the time that was like, actually, like, we're going to teach you how to date. Like, you're allowed to be 17, 18, 19 dating, but like, I'm not going to let you suddenly become like the new hoe of the rooms. And that has been the thing that I've carried in throughout my recovery was like I am a firm believer of like I'm not one of those people that are like, hey, you can't date someone in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous if you're in it. I like having a partner who's in Alcoholics Anonymous because it's such a huge part of my life that doing something with someone who shares the same joy for it that I have, I find it really like dumb, but I find it like really spiritual and romantic that like we work on these service projects together and we get to like create magic just doing what we're supposed to be doing. And most of my dating life and recovery is not compromising what I think I want because, like, I think this is what I deserve. You know, I see so many people, especially gay people in recovery, who are like, yeah, he's not the greatest, but like, neither am I. And I'm like, that's not how this works. Like, you have like don't sell yourself short because like you think you have to pay like back taxes on what a terrible person you were in the past. Like you're a great person now. Why would you like sell yourself short? The other thing I find really helpful for anyone who's dating in recovery, a really thorough sex inventory that creates a very thorough sex ideal. So I have a sex ideal that like when I started dating, if people didn't match it, I wasn't going to try to force these puzzle pieces to fit. Like if I had something that like I knew wasn't going to work for me and they'd be like, "Ooh, but I'm really into this." It's like, "Well, then we're just not going I'm not going to waste a bunch of time trying to make this fit because and that's okay that it doesn't."
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that that's been definitely hard to for like me to learn and talk about and people with people in recovery is like it's okay if we disagree, like both with romantic things in the bedroom things as well as in relationships, day-to-day stuff. It's like I can meet people that I don't vibe with, and that doesn't mean that they're bad people or that I'm bad people, but it's just that we just don't vibe together. And I feel like that's something that you can like I learned almost like in the bedroom at first, and I was able to kind of take it out of the bedroom. We're like, wow, this applies to real people and relationships too.
Yeah, yeah.
And speaking of that, how would you say you're able to apply your program into your daily life, like outside of recovery? But do you ever think of like, I recently had like the eye-opening experience at like a work experience for a week where someone was like talking about how to run their business, and I was like, oh, it's like one day at a time. I think I hear that sometimes some other places of like kind of the way that I like am building my business, so like you take it one day at a time. Like, do you have moments like that where you apply things from the program into outside program things?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things that like the program, I'm working a lot right now in like 6 and 7 in my personal life. So the humility steps. And two parts of that that I really appreciate is like I run my own business by doing hair, and I've had to learn. I used to get really in this mindset that like my time was the most important. Like my time is my money. Like you're like working off my time and learning that like the humility of like, well, my time isn't the most important. So like when people have to like reschedule or they're running late, I don't get frustrated.
Mhm.
And I like recognize that like the humility of like knowing that I'm not just because I'm providing a service does not mean I'm the most important person in this like business transaction. Because realistically, like I wouldn't have a business if you didn't pay me. And the other thing too is like when things are going on around me with like my coworkers, my boyfriend, people like that, how personal am I going to take the human experience? Like, how am I like they could be upset about something and it's my choice if I want to take it personally or if I like have the humility to be able to recognize that like this isn't about me.
Mhm.
When my sponsees are upset and they're like biting my head off, like it's not because they hate me as a sponsor. It's because they have their own stuff going on. So it's like up to me if I want to like think that I'm so important that this whole attitude that they have is directed towards me because of me, or if it's just like it's just their attitude right now. And I think that's been really, really helpful is that idea of like, I'm not that important that people are taking out like everything that's going wrong is my fault.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And as you're talking about that, I'm like, that's why my sponsor has me living in 6 and 7 for a while right now, as I'm going through some certain things. He's like, why don't you stay there for a little bit before we move on? So I'm like, good idea.
Yeah.
Excellent. And out of all your time in the rooms, we hear all these different phrases. Do you have a favorite mantra or quote that you live by or love?
Not like not really. I like they still all those like cheesy sayings really sometimes just like sometimes someone will say them to me and you can tell it's the first time they've ever heard it and they think it's like, you know, Gandhi speaking and they say it to me. I'm like, I just want to smack the dog shit out of you for telling me that. But the one that like realistically that I like say under my breath a lot is like let go, let God.
Hmm.
Like if I have one that is just like constantly like in my head, it's like when because I get irritated real easy. Like the wind decides to blow west instead of east, I'm like, yo, that shit's pissing me off. And it's like just let go, let God. And that helps. It like brings me back into reality of like this has nothing to do with me. Like, why am I so upset and taking this thing that has literally no control over? Like, why am I taking it so personally?
Yeah, it's a conscious effort that I understand that sometimes that's not something like people have to work towards, but I get that same way where something happens and I'm just like my gut reaction is chaos and then I have to kind of course correct.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I am sure this is the first of many episodes having you on as a guest, so welcome to the Gay A family.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a treat.
Yes, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode. Make sure you're following us wherever you listen, as well as on the socials at Gay A Podcast. And until next time, stay sober.